Hi everybody and welcome back. I'm Lyndon, your host of the tired old, fat, ugly, overworked, underpaid, fed up, tired and weary 1 man 15-minute Christmas, no waffle, no frills, 1 man Christmas bedtime story. Phew, someone chuck me an inhaler before I pass out. Anyway, here we are, it's Christmas. Bit different this year for everyone, but come on, keep smiling, stay safe and we will all get there. As usual, I'm well chuffed if you're here again, or if it's your first time, thank you for listening. I hope you all enjoyed the story. There is no waffle, all the waffle is at the end. So you can turn me off if you had enough of my voice, or listen on to my shout outs and thank yous, and with that, let's crack on. So there I was this week looking for a nice festive massacre for the week's episode, but apparently it turns out us Brits don't really do grisly murders at the festive season. If you know better, then you can send me a message. So, I had to go all transatlantic and turn to our cousins in the good old USA, and I found a little humdinger. So, let me please take you back to Christmas Eve in 1881 to the town, I don't want to offend anyone, of Ashland in Kentucky, near the Ohio border 139 years ago this very night. Mrs. Martha Gibbons wished to go with her youngest son Sterling to visit relatives and would not be home until the following day. She was having to leave eldest son 17-year-old Robert and her daughter 14-year-old Fannie at home. So as Robert only had one leg, after losing the other in an accident with a railway carriage when a young boy, she wanted someone to help 14-year-old Fannie and keep her company. So she went across the road to see Mrs. Thomas to ask if she would be okay if her daughter, 15-year-old Emma, would agree to go over and help Fannie. Mrs. Thomas and Emma agreed, so over the road she went to spend the night. Everything was quiet until about 5 a.m. the next morning, when Mrs. Thomas, looking out of the window, saw a glow coming from the Gibbons house. She rushed over to the house and, seeing the extent of the blaze, she cried for help. Neighbours and the fire service arrived and did try to help. When they did manage to get inside, the bodies of the 3 children were found and pulled from the blaze and laid outside on a mattress. At first, it was assumed they had suffocated, with the smoke then burned in the fire. But the next day, after being examined, it was found the 2 girls had been brutally raped, and all 3 children had had their skulls smashed in. Evidence recovered from the scene included blood-soaked sheets and pillows, and a crowbar and an axe which was covered in blood and hair. The very same day, the Mayor of Ashland formed a committee to raise and pay for investigators from other counties to come in and find those responsible for these horrendous crimes. They raised $1,000, equivalent to $25,000 today. At first, Robert and Fannie's father, George Gibbons, was the prime suspect. He didn't get on with his wife, so spent long periods of time away from home. US Marshal Heflin of Maysville, the people's choice to lead the case, worked hard to prove George could not have committed the crime, as he was in West Virginia, where he had been since December the 16th, so he was finally discounted. This is where bricklayer George Ellis enters the story. He was buying a cigar and in conversation with Mr. Powell, the proprietor of Geiger, Powell and Ferguson General Store in Ashland. Making conversation, Mr. Powell asked Ellis, "Now old man Gibbons is not in the frame, I wonder who it will fall on next." Straight away, Ellis looked startled and could no longer look Mr. Powell in the eye. He then suddenly blurted out that he might know who did it, and then murmured something about state's evidence, before turning and walking briskly out of the store. He then walked around for hours imagining everyone was staring at him until he eventually came to a decision. He walked into the hotel and straight to the door of the room Marshal Heflin was staying in. He said he knew something about the murders and wanted to know more about state's evidence. Heflin explained about how a person who had committed a crime could receive a lesser sentence for informing on others who participated in the crime. After hearing this, Ellis decided he wanted to ease his conscience. He said that two fellow bricklayers, William Neal and Ellis Craft, had been saying that they were going to have intercourse with Emma and Fannie before Christmas time. Ellis said Neal and Craft had threatened him the night of the murders at gunpoint to come with them to the Gibbons house. When they got there, Craft raised a window with an old axe and stepped in. Neal followed, and I waited in the porch for a while, then went in too. When we entered, Robbie Gibbons woke and struggled to get up. Craft said to him, "You better lie still," and then he approached the girl's bed. Robbie managed to get up, so Craft turned, hit him with the axe. He fell back onto the lounger, then plunged 6 feet forward under the stairs. The girl screamed when Craft jumped onto the bed. Emma started to escape from the bed, but Neal grabbed her, choked her, and pulled her to the floor, where I held her while he outraged her. Neal, when he had finished, then struck her on the head with the big end of the crowbar. She threw up her hands and I think died instantly. Craft was also having trouble with Fannie and called for me to hold her while he outraged her also. He then killed her with the axe. As I had had no part in the killings, they forced me to pour coal oil over the bodies and set fire to them. We then left the house. This, of course, now led to the arrest of Neal and Craft, and Ellis repeated his statement twice more in front of them. Then, very strangely, they were all put overnight in the same cell. Now, not surprisingly, the next morning, Ellis wanted to recant his statement, but the marshal was having none of it, and the trial was set for the 16th of January. Due to the fact that the three accused were in danger of being lynched by the mob, the decision was made to move the prisoners by boat to Maysville. Now, the mob were not happy, so gave chase in a steamboat. Shouldn't imagine that was much of a chase. When they got there, they persuaded the judge there would be no lynching. They just wanted them to be returned to Ashland to seek justice there. On the 11th of January, the three men were brought back to Catlettsburg for trial. First up was William Neal for the murder of Emma Thomas, and after an 8-day trial, the jury took just 18 minutes to find him guilty and call for the death penalty. Next up was Ellis Craft. This trial too lasted several days, ending in the jury taking 20 minutes to find him guilty too and call for the death penalty. There was now a lengthy period of appeals and stays of executions. At one time, Ellis changing his story totally by saying that he and two African-American men had committed the crimes when William Neal's blood-smeared coat found near the Gibbons house was entered into the evidence. He then tried to plead insanity. Now, the public were now getting very twitchy about these sentences not being carried out. On Tuesday, May the 30th, at long last, George Ellis went to trial. He was charged with the murder of Robbie Gibbons, and after 22 hours the jury found him guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison. Now, of course, this did not go down well with the people of Ashland. On the Friday after Ellis's sentencing, 18 masked men hijacked a train to Catlettsburg, stormed the jail, kidnapped Ellis, and he was taken back to Ashland to a big sycamore tree. He was asked if he was truly guilty of the murders of the children. He replied he, Kraft and Neil were all guilty and deserved to die. So they hung him for a while, let him down, let him recover, and asked him again. By all accounts, he was pretty pissed off about being half hung and told them to get on with it and do it properly, which they did. And the coroner cut him down next day, killed by person or people unknown. I've now cancelled my Airbnb in Ashland for the summer holidays. And we haven't finished with the people of Ashland yet. By October 1882, nearly a year after the crimes, Slippery William and Ellis have still avoided the noose, and the townsfolk are getting restless. So when they decide to move the trial to Carter County in the following February, they were having a steaming hissy fit. So when Neil and Kraft were to be escorted to Lexington by armed soldiers by steamboat, they really lost it. 200 men and boys came rushing into town, but the boat was on its way, so they raced to get ahead of it at Ashland, where there was also a lot of townspeople on the river banks watching the action. 18 of the boys got on a ferry and sailed it towards the steamboat, demanding that the prisoners be handed over. They fired a couple of shots off. The soldiers responded with 1,500 rounds, killing 4 people on the riverbank. Ellis Kraft was eventually hanged in Grayson on October the 12th, 1883, still pleading his innocence. William Neal on March the 28th, 1885, after having used up all his appeals, also went to the gallows at Grayson. He also still was pleading his innocence. How did 3 men with no violent convictions come to do this act? I believe one of them did, but maybe not all 3. And how did they know the 3 children would be on their own that night? That was only decided that evening between the 2 mothers, and of course the children would have known, but that's all. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that jolly Christmas story. If you want more, I'm doing an Under the Covers episode tomorrow, because everybody loves ghost stories on Christmas Eve, don't they? Anyway, thank you very much for listening. And normally now it would be waffle time, but not tonight. I'm going to say good night, have a lovely night, and if you're not going to be here for the ghost stories tomorrow, have a fantastic Christmas, stay safe, and we'll all be there together in the new year. Good night, and remember, not everybody you meet is as mad as a box of frogs. Good night.